Okay, we're live. Uh, Welcome everyone to the July 1st, 2020 Diagnostics Deep Dive meeting. We don't have a... We'll be discussing the user journeys we've been discussing for the past few meetings. But before we get started, does anyone have any announcements?
This could very well be discussed in the standard agenda as well, but I just want to say that the diagnostic session in the Collab Summit last week went well. I was able to explain the philosophy, current status, challenges, and opportunities for both user journey based deep dive and diagnostic best practice documentation. Uh, Of course, the overall numbers were pretty less. So I guess around less than 10 members participated. Hopefully, we should see some newcomers joining the working group. Hopefully. Yeah, that's pretty much from my side.
That's good. Did anyone share their names or ask it to be pinged on issues to get started?
Uh, I don't remember any.
Okay. Any other announcements? So I started the discussion with the website redesign team to include diagnostics guides there. Um, they seem to be on board, so we just need to decide how to move our guides from the diagnostics repo to the redesign repo, and also decide how future docs will be written, if they're going to be written on the diagnostics repo, or if we are going to write them straight to the website repo. This will show only on the new website, not on the old website, but I think it's for the best because the old website doesn't have a good section for us to add these guides. And the new website, you can write the guides on Markdown. So most of the guides we already have, they are already on the format that we need. So there is not much work to do, but there is some work to do. We just need to figure out how to move those guides there.
Just for the sake of my understanding, the old and new website which we are talking about, is it the old one, the green website, which is nothing but the node.js.org domain, and the new one is the node.dev website?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So the original plan with respect to the best practice documentation was iterate in the diagnostic working group repo. um, Basically, by iterate, what I mean is do a proper PR review and make sure all the stakeholders are happy. And then once we freeze on the structure, the content, and the flow, then mm, change the markdown style to a website style, and then pass it on to the uh, foundation team members, who foundation or comcom, I'm not very sure, who is responsible for hosting the website, and they can take it forward to publish in the website. That was what I vaguely remember when we started with the documentation work. So right now, the change from that status is that we have a fair process in place for the documentation work. We have a good structure in place about how a best practice documentation should look like. For example, a setup, we have a prerequisite, and then we have different flows, step one, step two, step three, kind of, which uniquely picks up one specific tool to address the user journey. So I guess we are more or less sticking to that style or that format for the user journey so far. So with that in place, if the question is, can we directly think about publishing to the website? Yeah, I think it looks interesting. It looks promising to me. Or at least we could start looking at publishing the existing documentation and see how it goes. What is the experience like?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We already have quite some documentation, but it's not visible to the users. Uh, and at first, I think it was fine. That was the plan. But we're starting to reach the end of the user journeys, I believe. In the issue, I mentioned that the only user journey I believe we still have left is unexpected behavior, unless someone else have another user journey they have in mind. Um, and to make it available on the diagnostics repository, it's simply to reading from our users. The new website is not that popular yet. It's not even officially published yet, I think. But at least when it's published, we would have the guides there if we move it there. So my goal with bringing this up is revisiting our decision to have everything on the diagnostics repo to make sure we don't have extra work on keeping everything in sync. Um, and one solution could be to have automation in place to move things from the diagnostics repo to the new website repo. Or we could just decide that from now on, the final guides will always go to the redesign repository, or we could keep in sync manually. I'm fine either way. I just want to make sure we have a clear strategy on moving forward.
Yeah, I think um, following the current procedure of iterating in the diagnostic working group, so that we have a proper review on the documentation. And then once we have the documentation landed in the repo, doing some automation to, such as a pipeline, which will take it up and publish in the new website in a completely automated manner, looks like a good idea to me, because it doesn't compromise on the quality which we want on the documentation. At the same time, reduces the effort, duplication effort also.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll create an issue to so that we know that we should try at least the automation. Someone has to write it, and with an issue at least other folks are aware as well. And if someone new is joining the working group, they might be interested in writing some GitHub actions to do that sync.
Do you know the new website is completely under the control or under the jurisdiction of the Node.js community, or is it hosted by some other third-party vendor?
Um, so do you mean who is
Because
developing it or who is hosting it? Because I think it's hosted. I don't think it's hosted in our infrastructure, but the working group responsible for it falls under the jurisdiction of the Node.js organization, and I'm almost sure it's a chartered working group by the TSC, but I'm not entirely sure, or by Comcom at least.
okay, yeah, the reason why I ask is, um, for example, we from the diagnostic working group or from the project as a whole provide this content saying that this is the best practice documentation, please publish this. But if there is another entity sitting in the website side who wants to review the content from uh, aesthetics and other structural considerations, look and feel and other things, and there is another process involved there, um, then probably the complete automation may not work because there is a manual review that is required. But if it is completely within the community, even if there is a review process, but that is from within the community itself, we could bring that review to the diagnostic repo and short circuit that additional review process. I'm not sure such a review process exists, but from last year's conversation, I thought there may be something of that sort.
Yeah, if there is a review process and we need to ping someone from the website to the diagnostics working group, I'm not entirely sure if writing automation in this case is worth it, because we could just be sending the request to the redesign website instead of sending them to the diagnostics repository. If we can automate everything without having to ping them all the time, I think it would be awesome. But if we have to ping them on every issue, um, I think we lose some value on the automation.
I agree. Yeah.
That's something I can ask on the issue I opened there. I also plan to attend a few of their meetings as an observer to better understand how the progress is going, what are the plans, how is the process, etc., to make sure that whatever we propose fits their process.
Sure.
Okay, does anyone have anything on this topic?
So one other point is, as you rightly mentioned, the documentation right now sitting in the diagnostic repo is not going to be consumed by the end user. But the moment it hits the um, new website, we might get a lot of suggestions, queries, clarifications, and feedback, hopefully. So we should also be needing to have a workflow for either modifying the documentation or extending it with new insights or adding new use cases or things like that. I'm just thinking aloud.
Mhm. I agree. Uh, I expect there to be lots of suggestions. I don't expect the documentation to be static. I expect it to evolve over time. Um, just as the ecosystem evolves over time, as the tooling evolves over time. Um, so one small thing that we can do to ensure that we are at least notified when someone wants to make changes to the documentation is having a code owners file on the redesign website for all the diagnostic guides so that the diagnostic working groups is pinged, is added as a reviewer, etc. Whenever there are changes there. So at least we can um, vet any requests if they should be included or not, or if we should bring to the meeting to discuss it further, or if it's not a best practice, which could happen as well. So having some way to the diagnostics working group be aware of those suggestions is something that we should consider. Code owners is one option. Another option is having our contact information on the bottom of those guides, or maybe having a link to the diagnostics repository. But I think it should be clear that the content was produced by the diagnostics working group and that we are open and hoping for suggestions and also open to discuss if the best practice that are there could be improved or if they should be changed because the ecosystem changed, etc.
Yeah. And in another scenario where a user who is consuming this documentation may have a specific workload which he has been running, and it's not completely covered in the documentation, or in which case he could actually come to the diagnostic repo and contribute it back to the repo, uh, which is a right fit for the coverage. So in that aspect also we should have a linkage from the documentation to the repo, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. So have others seen the website? I'm I'll share the screen here. Can everyone see the new website?
Yeah.
Okay. So my suggestion was there is this learn tab which has a lot of guides. My suggestion was to add another of these sections, like getting started, but for diagnostics. and then have the guides there. The way it's presented here, it's linear, but I think the way we write the text, we can show that it's not linear, but based on the symptoms that you're having, you should go to one guide or the other. Unfortunately, I think the navigation is fixed. I don't think there is a way to represent this back and forth that we have on our guides in the navigation, but you can represent it in text, so it should be fine. What others think of that idea? Having it as a category here, or do you think it deserves a tab on the website, which I think it might be harder to get alignment with the website working group, but we could suggest as well. Should it? Oh, documentation is the old website. Okay. Or should it be on documentation, which today is the old website? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I haven't navigated enough in the page to make an opinion, but
Yeah, one thing is the list of learn guides is very long. So, for example, think there are, I don't know, 30 get started guides, and then it would be a diagnostics guides in the bottom with another 10, 20 guides. So this scroll would be long. But
yeah,
maybe the website is considering collapsing it due to the number of guides that are here already. I can ask them that as well. But that's the original idea, create another category here for diagnostics. And I believe if it proves to not be a good idea, we can still move it somewhere else. But at least as a starting point, personally, I think that's a good place to have it.
yeah. In terms of visibility, discoverability, I think this left-hand side pane is a very good location because this is exactly the location where the APIs and the actual Node.js functionalities or features are discussed. But if we spread the content as top level sections, then definitely the number of items grow large and it will uh, mutually reduce the discoverability and reduce the overall user experience. So either have a documentation section at the top level. I mean, not in this pane, but a separate diagnostic section, which can be which is accessible from this main page, or in the left hand side pane, a top level entity called diagnostics, which is expanded into a tree. So that means we are not altering the structure of the left hand side pane much, while the diagnostics stand as an independent entity, and it gets opened up as if in a tree manner. Just a thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I try to share that as well with the redesign team. I just want to hear if they already have thought on how to expand this section. Um, since they are working on the website, I imagine they already had to scroll this a lot more than I have. So they might have thought about that already. If not, we can suggest something. I like the suggestion of expanding the diagnostics tree here. I think other websites already do that. Not the node.js website, but just other websites. Okay, on the moving the guides to the website, does anyone have any other comments, suggestions, concerns, wonderings? Okay, I'll try to find out the answer to some of the questions we raised. Um, I didn't start an agenda today because I was preparing for more deep dive meeting, but later I'm going to rewatch the recording and write an agenda and send to the repository. Maybe we should start an agenda to the following deep dives as well, in parallel with the deep dive doc. Okay, so talking about the user journeys, let me open here. We have discussed performance, memory leaks, and process crashes so far. And the only other user journey I can think of is unexpected behavior. So I suggested we could talk about this one, but maybe I'm not thinking of some valid user journey. So does anyone, can anyone think of other user journeys or other um, more general use cases where diagnostics apply? It would be good to have a list of remaining user journeys so we know how many of these meetings we still have. I also think we should do a review of what we already have once we've gone through all the user journeys. We already have this kind of plan for the BPF tooling, but I think, for example, we didn't cover tracing that much, and tracing would probably fall under performance, although it can also fall under unexpected behavior. Okay, so I said a lot of things. So first, does anyone think of any other user journeys besides those four?
And so then Stephen posted a posted topic about the hooks, and I think that the post of the Stephen that on the standard team, they mentioned that there are hooks like FS hooks and this and the diagnostic channel, things like that, that we can like say if there is anything we would like to hook up the Node.js core module or any other modules, if this will during the user journey case.
Yeah, so I think the hooks falls under tooling and not under user journeys. So for example, hooks on the FS system could be used to detect performance issues or memory leaks or unexpected behavior. but they are not a user journey per se. I see them more as a BPF thingy, which we should probably, when we're revisiting the user journeys, we should probably talk about hooks as well. But I don't see it as a user journey per se. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking that if we can broaden the Eurogenic case, so that maybe we can have more topics on regarding the deep dive. Just a thought.
Sorry, I didn't understood the suggestion.
Yeah, I was thinking that if we can broaden the deep dive topics, like say we can have more toolings on more discussion on toolings that if there is a, like say we would like to debugging our apps using the just mentioned the hook system and not just the performance issues. I'm not sure if I expressed that clearly.
So do you mean to expand the scope of deep dive, user journey based deep dive to accommodate more tools?
Yeah, then maybe these tools might not be helping on the performance aspect, but helping users to find if there is anything that can help them to build up their systems, like debugging and mocking, etc.
Yeah, but if you look at the original premise in which the user journey initiative was started, um, it's like too many tools, and not necessarily all the tools are covering a specific user journey end to end. Some of the tools work for certain scenarios, but not necessarily uh, covering a common scenario at all. So we had so much of such tools. Some of the tools were not properly maintained. Some of the tools did not have you know a community behind it. So that was a problem we addressed through the user journey based uh, tooling, user journey based diagnostics, whereby we thought of starting everything from the user journey. If we have a use case which is coming from a running application anomaly, and then try to fit the existing tools gaps or surplus in that particular use case or the user journey. The story of the person who is actually doing the diagnostics from the symptom or from the anomaly becomes the user journey. And if and in that course of journey we fit the tool if it is if it is aligned with the user journey. So if you look at some of the documentation, we have step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, where multiple tools are contributing to same user journey, and that is accommodated in different steps. So those are the scenarios where multiple tools are useful or redundant, alternatively available to debug same or similar scenario. So if we have more tools, like for performance, definitely there would be a lot of tools. And even for live debugging, I believe there could be many. So the idea should be uh, add it across different steps in the documentation. In the deep dive, yes, if we have if we have a tool that fits into one of the existing user journeys, we could always revisit that and fit the tool. Fit meaning we can discuss where is the relevance coming in and attach it.
Yeah, I agree with Girish. And also, we did discuss some hooks on at least the performance analysis. We gave a suggestion to explore the idea of using async hooks, for example. Um, but overall, the user journeys are focusing on the tool, the from the symptoms, what are the most common tools you can use versus what are all the tools you can use. I think we can do a second pass on all the user journeys once we are finished with them, and add another section with, okay, so those tools that we showed so far are used on most user cases. If those don't work, there is also XYZ, and just give a brief explanation on how those tools can help instead of a whole guide, and link to an external resource. But those tools should be more advanced and or a lot more niche on the user journey, that they do not fit in the user journey document, how we are describing the document so far. Uh, that doesn't mean we didn't miss any tools. That doesn't mean we can't change any tools. That doesn't mean we can't add. I think that's going to happen. I think when we revisit, we are going to add at least one more tool on the user journeys. I don't think we explored the async hooks as much as we should, for example, but that might just be because we don't have enough knowledge in the working group, or at least in the pool of folks participating in the user journey deep dives. Um, but I agree we should continue focusing on a user journey from a I have a problem X, how do I solve it perspective. Uh, but maybe we should have a list of tools to see if they fit on those user journeys. So I think I agree with both of you.
Yeah, this makes sense.
And another thing, I'm not entirely sure if the unified hooks discussion will fit this standard meeting. So I was thinking about proposing we do one of the deep dives meeting to discuss that instead of the user journeys. We just need to decide this before the meeting is scheduled, so that folks are aware that that week we are going to be talking about something else. Uh, when we initially proposed the deep dives back in 2018, the idea was to discuss multiple topics, one topic per meeting. But since last year, we have been using it only for the user journeys, partly because we didn't have anything else to discuss, partly because this is probably the most important work the working group is doing so far. So, but I would be open to have one deep dive discussing another topic. And also, if needed, since deep dive works differently than standard meeting, we could adjust the time a little bit better to make sure it fits everyone that is interested in that topic. Since I'm not, and like, it doesn't necessarily everyone that's present here today is also interested in the unified hooks. Um, so we should probably open an issue and gather interest and try to find um, a common timing for everyone. Not sure if others agree or if you think we should stick to user journeys at least for a month or two more.
I was thinking about that if we can maybe move the document that you presented in the screen and move this document to the repo so that we can continue work on this document with the GitHub PR process offline. So for most of the documents, like say document thing, we don't have to put them in the meeting and discuss them in online, and we can have have a agenda to discuss in the meeting if necessary, so that we can hopefully we can move this document faster. Just my thought.
Sorry, which document is it?
The document you are presenting.
Which document?
The document you are presenting.
Oh, this is the performance use case that
Yes.
we discussed in the past 4 deep dives, I think.
We have been working on this document through the last few deep dive meetings, so I was thinking that if we can work on this document offline with the GitHub PR process, so that we can have more reviews from the other person that didn't attend the deep dive meetings.
I agree. The idea was that this document was mostly done except for the to-dos. And we should be moving to the next use case now, which is the unexpected behavior. But also we need to start turning these into guides like we did with the other user journeys. I think we should continue how we were doing. When someone have the time, they can pick the user journey and write one of the guides. I think it has been working fairly well for now. If at some point we start to get stuck, we can even have a deep dive to create deep requests together. One of the reasons that we started the deep dives on user journey was that no one had the time to work on it. So having a meeting where we were discussing helped us allocate this time every 2 weeks. And also it gave good results with the discussions. So we started for one reason, and I believe we got a few other benefits out of it. So I wouldn't mind trying the same to write the pull requests, for example. I think it would have good results too. If anyone has interest, also the 3 user journeys that we discussed so far are on the meeting for this week. Maybe someone should go through these user journeys, list the use cases and tooling we have, and make a list of which ones we already moved to the repository. I can try to do that, but I can't make any promises. My schedule is a bit weird lately. But at least we know what else we need to move to the repository. Okay, we have 6 minutes left. I don't think we can start the unexpected behavior use case today. So does anyone have anything else to discuss? Or maybe we could finish the meeting a few minutes earlier.
Yeah, I don't have anything to discuss.
There are 2 questions on the chat. Gist of what we are going to look upon. I believe it was a question on what we would be discussing. So we have weekly meetings on the diagnostics working group. Every other week, we have a standard meeting where we get the agenda based on items flagged for the working group across the entire Node.js organization. And in the other 2 weeks, we have deep dive meetings where we discuss specific topics. For the past few months, we have been discussing diagnostic user journeys and use cases and which tools can be used to solve those use cases and user journeys. We might continue doing that on the deep dives, or we might change as necessary on a week-by-week basis. This week, we discussed mostly strategy on the deep dives moving forward. So how we want to present it to the users. And the primary idea right now is to add it to the new website. And also how to organize the remaining user journeys, how to revisit, what else we have to discuss, etc. And that's it. That's our meeting. The other question is Zoom link. We always post the Zoom link on the meeting agenda, which is present on the Node.js/diagnostics repository on GitHub. That's the 2 questions we have on YouTube. Sorry, I don't know how to pause the share. So you get to see YouTube. All right, I think that's it for this week. If anyone has anything else to share, otherwise we can finish now.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.